the topic of, today we're looking at the topic of multilingualism and English, how we use English in a multilingual classroom. Just a few housekeeping rules to start. Please turn off your cameras and keep your microphones mute during the main session. I think they may have been disabled anyway. And please share your questions or any comments in the Q&A box. I think the chat box may have been disabled, but please put those in the Q&A box, and my colleagues from the British Council will let us know if we have any questions, and we'll try to field them to the panelists as well. And please note as well that this session is being recorded, and so that we can share it later on. And note the line at the bottom there. So you're giving us your consent for us to record this, and then later on we'll be sharing the recording on our YouTube channels certainly in Indonesia, and in Vietnam as well, and possibly in Myanmar and Thailand as well. Okay, so that's the housekeeping rules. We've got a lot to cover today, and I've got a really fascinating topic and a really interesting panel. So I'm going to start by introducing you to our teachers from across our region today, across the ASEAN region. And in typical ASEAN style, we're going to start with alphabetical order. So we're going to start in Indonesia, first of all. So I'm going to introduce you to Sabrina. So hi, Sabrina, how are you? Selamat sore, is that right?
Hello, selamat sore. Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you all. I'm Sabrina from Aceh, Indonesia.
Okay, and so as we go around, you can see on the screen there, you can see some information about some information about Sabrina. So Sabrina, can you tell us perhaps a little bit about the context in which you live and you work and you teach as well, in terms of a multilingual environment?
Okay, well, I'm from Aceh, which is a multilingual community, and the people here generally can speak 3 to 4 languages. Some other can speak more. And the first language that we can speak here is the Acehese language, because it is like the main local language or the home language to the majority of Acehese people. And after that, we also learn Indonesian, because Indonesian is our national language used in many formal settings. And we also learn Arabic, because in Aceh, the parents generally want the children to be able to understand or recite Al-Quran. So they send us to boarding school or religious teachers that can teach us Arabic. And after that, we also learn English, because it has become a demand and part of the curriculum today. And we started learning English since we were in primary school.
Okay, right. And so for example, for you, how many, you personally, Sabrina, how many languages do you speak?
4 languages.
4, you speak. Wow, amazing, fantastic. All right, thanks very much for sharing that. It's great to have you with us today. Really appreciate it. Terima kasih. Okay, and we'll move to the next, again, staying in alphabetical order. We'll move to Myanmar, and Mr. Yan, Mingalaba, Mr. Yan.
Oh, Mingalaba. Yes, nice to meet you all.
How are you today?
Yes, I'm Yanai Sonyo, and you can call me Yanai. I am currently running an online school, but in my life, I worked as a primary school teacher for about 5 years, and middle school and high school teacher for about 10 years, and also as a university teacher for about 5 years. I also wrote articles on child psychology and educational psychology. And because I am a teacher from Myanmar, I normally have to teach students from multilingual backgrounds, and this issue is a very important issue for teachers in our country. I thank British Council for giving me a chance to participate in this very meaningful and interesting seminar. Thank you.
Thanks, Jan. And can I just ask the same kind of question as I asked Sabrina before? So you've said it's very important in Myanmar. Obviously, there's lots of different ethnic groups and languages as well. So what's, in your context, what's the situation there in terms of a multilingual context or a multilingual environment?
For example, in our class, we normally have students from different ethnic backgrounds. So they can normally speak maybe Burmese, the majority language, and also their ethnic language. And at the same time, they are also learning English. That's a very multilingual environment.
Okay, great.
Important.
Mm-hmm. All right, thanks, Jan. Yeah, thanks for joining us today. I've forgotten how to say thank you in Burmese. How do you say thank you in Burmese? Yeah.
Jesu.
Jesu, I remember that now, yes. I do remember, thank you. It's a few years since I've visited Yangon and Mandalay. Okay, moving around our region. So next we're going to Thailand and we're going to meet Miss Poi. So Sawadee Kap, Poi, how are you today?
Sawadee ka. I'm really good. Thank you very much for inviting me to join this seminar today. Well, let me introduce myself. My name is Sineerat, and I am a teacher of elementary and secondary school in the north of Thailand. And the school is located on the mountain, well, nearby the border of Myanmar. So my students are totally 100% tribal children, and with the variety of tribes and culturally and linguistically diverse. So that's why, you know, it's very important to teach English and with many different languages that they can speak.
So for you, Poi, in Chiang Rai, do you at home, do you speak Thai or do you speak another language with your family?
I am Thai. I speak Thai.
You speak Thai at home, but with your students?
At home, right.
But with your students?
Thai and some local languages as well.
Yeah. Okay.
And I learned their language too.
Okay. What kind of languages?
Well,
what kind of local languages in Chiang Rai?
There are many. In Chiang Rai, it's called Lana language or Kam Mueang. It is the language from the northest part of Thailand. But here on the mountain, there's many languages like Hmong, Akha, Myanmar as well, Myanmar as well, and the other tribes as well. Okay. So I can speak like the little thing from them. Right.
Okay, really interesting. Thanks, Poi. Great to have you with us. Kopkun Kap. Okay, and last but not least, we go to Vietnam. Well, not actually Vietnam, but I'll let Miss Mai explain that about. So morning, Mai's joining us not from Vietnam today, but originally from Vietnam. Over to you, Mai.
Hello, everyone. It's really great to join the webinar today, and I'll just tell you a bit about myself. I'm originally from Vietnam. I worked as an English teacher at Huế University for around 7 years before I relocated to the UK. Currently, I'm based in Manchester, working as a lecturer in applied linguistics and TESOL at Manchester Metropolitan University. And mainly my multilingual experience is with working with teachers and teacher learners, teacher trainees from different contexts. Here in the UK, we have teachers, apart from local British teachers who want to learn about English teaching, to teach in different contexts. We also have teacher learners from different countries, from other countries in Europe and also in South America, in Africa, and different parts of Asia. So it's been really interesting for me to be exposed to different languages as I deliver my teacher education sections. So hopefully I can share some of that experience with everyone today.
Great, thanks, Mai. So yeah, quite a different, as you say, a different way of thinking about multilingualism in a kind of a more in an international context rather than in a kind of local context here in our region. So yeah, interesting. I'm still working with Vietnamese teachers as well, Mai, on some of our British Council projects, yes?
Yeah.
Great, okay. So thanks everyone. So that's our panel today. As I say, if you have any questions or any comments, please put them in the Q&A, and my colleagues from my British Council colleagues will try to share those for us as well. And later on, we're going to introduce you to Mr. Yan. He's going to introduce you to a free course that is starting today, a free course on English in the multilingual classroom. So we'll say a bit more about that later on, okay? But for now, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Great. And hopefully you can see all our panelists. So welcome everybody. And thank you again. Cảm ơn rất nhiều to Mai. I didn't use any Vietnamese with Mai, so a little bit multilingualism to start amongst the five of us. So we're going to say just got maybe 2 or 3 questions that we're going to explore between the 5 of us with our expert panel. And then at the end, as I say, Jan's going to introduce the course to us, the new online course from Teaching English that starts today. And at the end, our 4 panelists are going to give us some top tips as well in terms of how to use, how to employ multilingualism in the classroom. So hopefully you can stay with us until the end, until about 45 minutes from now. Okay, so to the first question, and I think I'll put this question to Mr. Yan first of all. So we've talked about your context, 4 very different contexts from the 4 of you. So how would you define multilingualism? What does it mean to you, Yan?
Oh yes, multilingualism is the ability to speak or use more than 1 languages. So actually, it is a very important issue for teachers in our country, because we have got different ethnic groups in our country. In a class, there can be students from different linguistic backgrounds. So that's why a teacher needs to understand, and teachers should promote multilingualism, because it can show respect to the identities of the students and raise cultural awareness and so on. So that's why it is an important issue. Yes.
Mm-hmm. All right, thanks, Jan. And what about, I'll just move around, it's maybe slightly different order. Sabrina, what about you in Aceh? What does multilingualism mean to you? Again, you talked before about the different, for example, you yourself have 4 languages. What about the students, the learners that you're working with?
Well, multilingualism, in my opinion, is the ability or the use of more than 2 languages. And I believe that this multilingual skill is dramatically significant these days, especially during the 4th Industrial Revolution, where technological advancements have brought people from different linguistic and cultural backgrounds closer like we do today. It will be very hard if we can only speak 1 language, for example, our home language, but we cannot speak English to communicate with each other. So I think this multilingual skill is very, very important. And I believe that people with multiple language skills have more benefit or a wider acceptance in the global industry today compared to those who can only speak 1 language or monolingual. And I always highlight to my students that if you want to have a better job opportunities or education, a better education, you have to be able to speak more than 1 language. So I believe that multilingualism is really, really crucial in today's era.
Okay, yeah, it's interesting to think about that. Not just as you say, Sabrina, not just the context, the teaching and learning context, but also looking to the future, the benefits as well of having a kind of a multilingual approach to how we learn and how we teach going forward for our learners. Thanks, Sabrina. Poi, what about you? Again, it's interesting to hear your context up in Chiang Rai on the border between Thailand and Myanmar. What does it mean to you, the concept of multilingualism?
For me, the multilingualism, it's a knowledge of more than 2 languages. And, you know, for me, I think it's very important for the one who knows many languages, because, you know, the career and the work today, especially in the north of Thailand, and especially for my student who live on the mountain, you know, they can live, like they can work in Myanmar, they can work in Taiwan or in many countries as well. So I think it's very important to be able to speak more than 2 languages. And as a teacher, I'm found out that the multilingualism student, they can learn English faster than the one who can speak only Thai, you know,
Okay.
because yes, they have the alphabet, they use English alphabets as well. And, you know, when they can speak many languages, their tongue can go through every accent. I think that's really good for me to teach English here. But, you know, the one important thing that we have to inspire them to learn English, because now they are afraid, and then they don't see the need of learning English now. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you said that, Poi, about. So Sabrina before was talking about the benefits after our learners finish at school or university. But as you were saying, Poi, having awareness of different languages can sometimes help us. Sometimes it can be a hindrance, but sometimes it can really help us in learning new languages or acquiring new languages. Yeah, because we're already thinking and we're already in that headspace of switching between different languages. So that's another nice way to approach it and to reflect on that. Thanks, Poi. Now, last but not least to Mai. Now, Mai, I said you mentioned in your introduction a slightly different context, perhaps. So what does it mean to you?
Yeah, because I work a lot with teachers from different contexts. So to me, multilingualism is about raising my teachers' awareness of the importance and the of having an understanding and awareness of different languages that the students might bring to the classroom, and to celebrate instead of to restrict their language use in the English classroom. I also work a lot in the areas of different varieties of English, particularly I look at the characteristics of Vietnamese English. And so to me, multilingualism is also about an awareness and understanding, appreciation of different varieties of English, be it from traditional English-speaking varieties like British or American, to more localized varieties like the different English that we are all speaking today, and we are communicating beautifully in our own way. So that's what I really want to highlight in terms of multilingualism.
Great, thanks, Mai. And that leads very nicely to our first question. So here's a question from Facebook, our Facebook audience, from Sai Kin Kin from Myanmar. And he or she, says, in Hungary, so this is for any of you who'd like to maybe answer this question. And it goes back to exactly what Mai was just saying. In Hungary, some professors do not try to understand the diversity of different accents. I'm very tired of practicing my pronunciation to be understood by professors. How should I try? Most American and British teachers understand my pronunciation. So that's quite a challenging question there from Sai Kin Kin, but an interesting question, yeah? Anybody like to have a go at answering that one?
It's a very interesting question, if I may share my
Please,
thought.
Mai, yeah.
We don't know. It's interesting because the question is about understanding and how intelligible we are when we communicate. And I think it's quite clear from the answer, from the question, that the one who asked the question, I'm sorry, I can't remember the name. You may remind me.
Sai Kin Kin.
Tai Kin Kin, yeah. To me, I think you are very intelligible already, Tai Kin Kin. So when we talk about being understood, when we use any language, not just English, I think oftentimes a lot of pressure is placed on the speaker. But I think it should also, the responsibility with communication is always two-way. So it's also the responsibility of the listener as well. So it really depends on who you are communicating with Thai thinking, in terms of whether or not you need to practice to make yourself understood, because intelligibility is two-way.
Yeah, I think that's the key point, isn't it? It's about being understood, being, comprehensibility, as you said. It's not about accents. As you said before, the five of us are on this panel, we're all conversing, we all have different accents from different parts of the world. I'm from Manchester, so maybe my who lives in Manchester finds it easier to understand my accent than other people. Other people might find my accent very difficult, but the five of us are still conversing, understanding each other, and trying to listen and understand one another. That's the key point, unlike the situation that Sai Kin Kin is having in Hungary, even though she or he is originally from Myanmar. Let's move on to our next question. I can see there's a few more questions coming in, and thanks to my British Council colleagues for helping to sieve some of those questions. I'll feed some in after the next one. So as a next question for you as the panel. So as a teacher, how do you use the idea or the concept of multilingualism in your classroom and with your learners? So Poi, let's go back to you in Chiang Rai.
Well, as I'm a teacher and teaching the student who lack motivation to learn English, first I will have to make them inspire them to love to learn English. Normally I use the communication language, CLT, the communication language teaching approach, because we have to start from the easy first. So what I do I have to bring their routine, the communication, what they can learn, and then what activity from them, implementations with their lifestyle, and then we bring it to them to learn how to teach. How to say, how to speak, and how to have the conversation with this, something like that. And for the little kids, I teach many of the kids and the children, so we have to use the games, song, and many of material that I will show you after. Yeah, something
towards the
like
end.
that.
Yes, keeping that for the end. That's
Right.
a great way to
Right.
keep. That's a great way to keep the audience till the end, Poi. Thank you for that. Thanks, Poi. What about you, Sabrina? How do you use multilingualism? And as you said in Aceh, your students have many different languages. So how do you use it when you're teaching with your learners?
I adopt multilingual approach in my classroom basically because my students have not had yet a high level of English proficiency. So I need another language that they are familiar with, be it Indonesian or Acehese, as a language instruction to teach them English. This is quite effective because they can understand better what I am saying. I have actually ever practiced teaching them English using only English, but it doesn't work because they don't have the necessary vocabulary yet. They don't develop the vocabulary or the understanding of the culture of the target language. So I need to introduce them to this basic skill first. And for those in the early stages of learning, I usually try to develop their vocabulary by using flashcards, for example. And in the flashcard, there are pictures with vocabulary in different languages. I teach them how to pronounce them and why the specific objects are called these ways. And once they have good amount of vocabulary, I will try or encourage them to use this. And for those who are at a higher level, I will try to create an activity like using Kahoot quiz, asking them the equivalent for certain phrases in English or Indonesian. And usually my students really enjoy this activity because it improves their cultural understanding. For example, for a phrase like seputi kapas in Indonesian, I asked my students, please, what do you think the equivalence for this expression? And they will literally translate the expression as white as cotton. And I say, no, native speaker of English don't say as white as cotton, but they say as white as snow. So these are cultural expressions that my students need to understand, and they really appreciate it. They really appreciate the multilingual approach that I adopt in my classroom.
Okay, that's interesting. Thanks, Sabrina. What about you, Mai? Again, it's a very different context, a kind of more international context. So how do you use a multilingual approach, if we can describe such a thing, in your kind of more amongst your more international students?
Yeah, with a group of international teachers from different contexts. I think it's really what I find really interesting is every time I walk into the classroom, students from the same first language background, they often sit together and they talk, and they really share ideas and challenges that they encounter when they live in a different country. And I think that's a very good way for them to bond and to learn. So I let them be in their own group when for example, with the start of a class. But then throughout the class, I also organize them into groups, and so that's how people from different places can mingle and use their own linguistic backgrounds in order to support each other. And so I think it's celebrating and acknowledging my teachers' different knowledge of different languages is one way for me to make them feel comfortable in the teacher training course.
So mixing the languages at different stages of the lesson.
That's right.
Allowing them to use their own languages in one part, and then kind of encouraging them all to use English as the common language in other parts of the lesson. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that your daughter? Is that your daughter that's there?
Yeah.
What languages is she? What languages is she using at home?
Yeah, we're like a bilingual family, I would say.
Oh, okay.
So we would like to keep the Vietnamese language thriving in our home. So she speaks Vietnamese at home, and when she goes to nursery, and in Manchester, she speaks English.
So we've got a live example there from the panel.
She wants an orange. She's just brought an orange to me.
She wants to join us. That's brilliant. Jan, what about for you? How does it work in Myanmar with you and your learners?
Yes, there are two situations that we have to face as a teacher in Myanmar. First, in some classes, we can use a CLT approach very successfully because of the student socio-economic backgrounds. But in some classes, we have got the same problems like teacher Sabrina from Indonesia, because the students are very weak in English to use mainly CLT. At the time, I use different approaches. For the CLT classes, whenever we do an activities or a lesson, we can carefully choose content that can promote multilingualism. Like, for example, if you ask students to talk about resources in Myanmar, and then they can talk about their culture and their resources in their own places, like this. And so we normally focus on, cultural awareness and the awareness of linguistic differences in our country. And this is one thing. For another situation, so where students are very weak at the time, we have to use Burmese to explain meanings or grammar. At the time, I normally use comparisons with their languages. Okay. For example, I love you. So in Myanmar, so we have got subject, object, verb pattern. But for Korean language, at the time, they have got subject, verb, object pattern. The same as English. At the time, students become more engaged in learning. So this is just an example. There are also many like this.
So they can see the patterns and the similarities and the differences and the patterns, and
make sense of that. Yes, when a teacher value their language and mention their languages, they feel happy. And one more thing is I also encourage them, I let them use in some situation their languages in the class to make them more comfortable. Yes.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, everybody. I'm just looking at some of the questions that are coming in. We've got one question here. Again, I'll open this to the panel if anybody wants to take it. Again, kind of related to what we've just been discussing. So, in your experience, does the use of this is from Zung Nguyen, I assume in Vietnam. In your experience, does the use of multiple languages in the classroom help or hinder English acquisition, and in what ways? Would anybody like to take Zung's question? From your experience. Oh, sorry, Poi, I just saw your hand. Did you put your hand up, Poi? Oh, no, I can, on my screen, I can see your hands up. I'll repeat the question. So in your experience, does using different language, multiple languages in a classroom, does it help or does it hinder English acquisition, English learning, and in what ways?
Yes, okay. In my own experience, sometimes it really helps if we use the other language to promote multilingualism in a class. But sometimes it doesn't work because we have to use English as a lingua franca in a class, especially when we are teaching students of higher level. But at the time, it is not very beneficial to use other languages all the time in a CRT class. But for the classes we are teaching, like Sabrina classes and my classes, at the time, using other languages does help because it can make students more comfortable. I think, yes, I think.
Thanks,
so.
yeah.
I agree with what Yan just said about using the first language or whatever languages that the students are comfortable with to create a very comfortable classroom atmosphere for everyone to feel like they belong and they are recognized. Yeah. But then it could create hindrances as well as
I think that goes back to what Poi was saying before about how to encourage, how to motivate our students in the classroom to learn English. And if one way to do that is to allow some use of a variety of languages in the classroom, then why not? But it's just about striking the balance, isn't it, really, I guess? So that's an interesting question. Okay, let's move on to another question now. So again, we're going to look at some challenges in a minute, but before we look at the challenges, what we've talked about hindrance, helps and hindrances. But before we look at some of the challenges, what do we think are the benefits of developing and promoting a multilingual approach in the classroom with your learners? Let's go to Sabrina perhaps first.
Well, I believe that there are a lot of benefits that we can get, or my student can get, when I promote multilingualism in my classroom. And one of them is that my student can embrace cross-cultural differences, because culture and language are inseparable. Culture are reflected from the language we use. And sometimes I teach them what we normally say in Indonesian are sometimes not common in English-speaking countries. For example, it is common in Indonesia to greet people by asking, "Have you eaten?" But this is not common in English-speaking countries. So please don't treat people that way.
Yeah, it's the same in Vietnamese. People greet each other by saying the same thing. Say, "Ăn cơm chưa?" Have you eaten yet? But in English, we don't use that as a kind of normal greeting. But in our part of the world here in ASEAN, in Indonesian, in Bahasa, in Vietnamese, I think in Thai as well, people use that it's quite a common greeting, isn't it? So again, seeing that commonality between the languages, especially in our part of the world.
Yeah.
So please, Sabrina.
Yeah, and something cultural that my students need to be able to understand, and the same goes to other phrases like, "Are you married?" or "What is your religion?" And these are just the sensitive questions that you should not ask in the greetings in the first meeting with the people speaking English. And I also introduce them to certain expressions such as like "fancy a cuppa," that show how much the Brits love drinking tea. And
Yep.
I also one time introduced them to a certain expression. It cost me an arm and a leg for something extremely expensive. And my student asked me, why do the native speaker of English say it cost me an arm and a leg? Why they say it for something very expensive? And I have to explain the history behind the phrase that people back then in England would prefer to have their upper half of the body drowned, but not the arm and the leg, because they cost very expensive. And they was like, oh, interesting. This is something new.
I didn't even know that. Thanks, Sabrina. I've learned something about that idiom now. While we're speaking to you, Sabrina, I've got a question here from Facebook, from Indonesia, from Adi Fadel Mahmood. He, I think, asks, what do you think if I teach EFL students who don't have a good level of English, so that in the classroom I use two languages, I switch between Bahasa, between Indonesian and English? What do you think, Sabrina, from your experience?
From my experience, I also use Indonesian as a language of instruction, especially when they don't have a really good English skill. And I try to build the vocabulary first. I do a lot of code switching and code mixing in the classroom until their level gets higher to intermediate, until they become advanced. And after as their proficiency increases, I also increase the frequency of speaking English. So it takes time, it takes process, and you have to be able to understand the process and help them with it.
Thanks, Sabrina. And what about you, Poi, in Chiang Rai in Thailand? What are the benefits? Again, you've got as you said, you've got lots of different languages where you're teaching, where you're working with your students. So what are the benefits for you of developing and promoting that kind of approach in your classroom with your learners?
Well, yes, I'm giving my English class to be more than boring class full of textbooks or worksheet, because as you know, my students are very, lack of motivation and don't like to learn English. So that's why I have to play many things, like use the active learning and activity games for them. They are just like, sometimes they're afraid to speak out loud, just only say hello, or if I ask, how are you? And they know that they have to reply, I'm fine, thank you, or whatever. But no, teacher, no, don't ask me, something like that. So to make them feel comfortable to say, we have to make something more funny, just like if they cannot say hello, I say, if you're happy and you say hello, and then they say hello, yeah, you can speak it like that. So we have to use like game, play, or song, something like that, or like, how are you, if they don't like to say how I'm fine. So I ask in the song, like, how are you? And then this, I'm fine. Yeah, just like playing with them or something like that. So just make them like, fun, feel funny and happiness to speak out loud, to learn. And then when they love and have passion to learn English, they will love to do more thing than learning. Like, teacher, I will have my friends in Europe, and then I want to say hello to them, or I want to have the communication with them. So how can I do? So they come to me, and then we can use this for one of the learning lesson. For example, they play games, and then they communicate with the another country player, and that's make them want to learn English more. So we have to make them fun, have fun with them, with the English class.
Thanks, Poi. I've got a question here from the audience. I think it's Prospero Igupen. I'm not sure where she or he is from, but it's an interesting question. She or he asks, should this again for any of you from the panel, should multilingualism in the classroom be encouraged at all levels, or just in the beginning level, at the beginning level of learning English and not at the advanced level? What do you think about that? Anybody got any opinions on that question? So at what level should we use a multilingual context in the classroom with our learners, depending on their level of English? Any thoughts?
Hello.
Yeah, Jan.
From my point of view, so we, we can use multilingualism in almost all levels. But I mean, it depends on the, the nature of the curriculum, the backgrounds of the students, and so on. When it is beneficial for them, we must use it. When it may be a hindrance for their language improvement, we must not use it. So it depends on many factors. We cannot, clearly, say that this is that and so on. So we cannot. It depends.
Yeah.
In all levels.
Yeah, and I agree with Jan as well. Like, sometimes my student have like different levels. Some learn fast and some learn slow. So I have to lesson plan. So we have to see the student first, if how much they can learn it, and then we create a lesson for them. And who learn fast, we have the other lesson plan for them too. And that's what my school do it.
Thanks, Poi. Thanks, Jan. That's a really good way to approach it, actually. Let's move on. We've got one last question, and I'll try to take one or two more questions from the audience before we move towards the latter part of our session. So the next one is about, again, challenges. We've talked about some of the benefits of multilingualism, but let's look at some of the challenges of this approach with our learners. Mai.
Yeah, I think I've read some of the questions in the Q&A, and I think that several participants have raised that as a challenge as well, regarding the use of the learners over reliance on whatever language that they feel comfortable with, and they lack practice in English, which is the target language. So I think that's perhaps one of the biggest challenges and paradox when it comes to employing a multilingual approach in an English classroom. Yeah,
and that goes back to exactly what Jan was saying before about how, when to use it, when not to use it, how to balance that as an experience. We're all experienced teachers, I imagine, on the panel and in the audience. So it's how we can make best use of that, as you say, Mai, to focus on the target language. What do you think, Jan?
Yes. For a teacher, there can be challenges, in three, for example, there are three levels of challenges for a teacher. First is, in a classroom level. So the teacher, at the time, the teacher can manage. For example, he can, promote multilingualism and cultural awareness in a classroom. That's important for, especially for us, because we have got a lot of ethnic groups, and harmony in class can also make a country in unity. That's why it is important. But for a teacher to carry out that plan, there must be other higher level supporting them, like curriculum designs and the school implementation styles. They are also very important. These are the challenges. We need to think of the language in education, the policy of languages in education. That's a very important issue. This is also a challenge. Yes.
That's a much, as you say, it's a much higher level challenge.
Yes,
maybe we can't cover it in the remaining 15 minutes, but it's great that you've raised that question, Jan. Thanks for that. I'm going to go to Sabrina next, and Sabrina, we're still staying on challenges, but I'm going to ask you a question from the audience as well. Jesse James Ramirez Dagunan, I think Jesse James, I think I met you in the Thai TESOL conference in Bangkok a few weeks ago, actually. So he asks, how do we make sure that English is still given emphasis during an English class in a multilingual classroom or a multilingual environment? How do you approach that in Aceh?
Well, actually, I also encounter challenges when I try to make the English as the focus in my classroom, because it's similar with what experienced by Nyunt and Poi, that when I allow my students to switch code or mix code a lot, they tend to be comfortable with that learning. And sometimes when I ask them a question in English, they respond in Indonesian or sometimes in Chinese. So I have to change my strategy. I have to like make an English day program where they have to speak English for the whole day. And this actually has a challenge because some students will do their best to communicate in English, but some others will remain silent for the whole day. They will avoid communicating for various reasons, like not having enough vocabulary or not confident or something like that. So I have to find the problem, the root problem for that. Oh, they don't have enough vocabulary. I have to strengthen that. Oh, they are not confident. I have to improve their confidence. So before I apply the English as the only language in the classroom, I have to address many other issues first. Yeah, before going to that. Yeah, so very important. I think if you teach in a multilingual classroom, you need to know your student well. What are their problems? Because they may have different problems, and after that, you can proceed to using English once all the problems solved.
Okay, great, thanks, Sabrina. And maybe last question, still on challenges perhaps, or for us as teachers to Poi, and then we'll move to the next part. This is a question from Facebook. There's lots of questions coming in on Zoom, but we perhaps haven't got time to address all of them today. But a question from Facebook from Alex Kyozin, maybe from Myanmar. Alex asks Poi, how can we apply the first language, a first language or first languages, to learn a second language? What's your experience up in Chiang Rai?
Well, for applying the first language to the second language or English or whatever, we need to use something that they're familiar. For example, the routine or whatever they can use. And you know, actually, I can tell you my class, I use Thai and English as well, because you know, sometimes when we speak all the time English, they don't understand. So we can translate and teach. And after that, you know, from Thai, we change something a little bit until they understand totally Thai. So it's normal for me, like we can speak the first language and include some English or some second language into the sentence. And after that, the first language will disappear one by one, and it's all totally, and then they understand. But you know what we have to do is take time, and we have to repeat. So we have to repeat again and again until they understand. So you know, it takes time, but it can work.
Great, yeah. Thanks, Poi. We're gonna pause there just for a moment, and then I'm gonna hand over to Jan, who's going to show us hopefully show us how to register, log on to the course that's starting, as I said at the beginning, today. The course is looking at how to use English in a multilingual classroom. Sabrina before talked about the idea of code switching. What does code switching mean? One of the questioners, Intan Rebecca, has asked, have you heard about translanguaging? Translanguaging, it's a rising theme here in multilingual classroom contexts in America. What about in Asia? So these are perhaps some new concepts that, again, we haven't got time to explore them today in the remaining 10 minutes, but I think you can learn more about them from the course itself. Okay, so if I just very quickly share my slide, hopefully I can share my slides with you, just very briefly, bear with me a second. And then I'm going to hand over to Jan, who hopefully share. Okay, we're getting there. Yes. So we've gone through. Great, thanks everybody for all your questions. I wish we could probably have 2 or 3 hours just to go through your questions. And I know that our panel would very easily be able to answer and respond to your questions. But what we're going to do now, as I say, is spend 5 minutes looking at the course. Just as a brief introduction. It starts today. It lasts for 4 weeks. There are 3 modules. It takes about 12 hours that you can do in your own time over the next 4 weeks. And there are also some Facebook group and Facebook Live events that go alongside that course. And at the end, you can receive a British Council certificate. And all of this is completely free of charge and available on the Teaching English website. So now, Jan, our panelist, has very kindly agreed to give us a little tutorial to show us how to log on. And then we're going to come back to our panelists for some final top tips about multilingualism. Jan, over to you.
Okay, thank you. Let me share my screen. So
please.
We'll do it a little bit quickly to save our time.
It's okay, that's fine. That's why we try it out, to see if we have any problems.
Like just, how to, search for the website on Google. So I think you can see teachingenglish.org.uk multilingualism in classroom. You just type like this and you can find the website, here, and click on it. So there you can see, the course here. But, the course is in multilingual classroom, but at the time you need to sign up first. So please click a free account. So this is the basic step. And then at the time you need to choose your avatar or your virtual face or picture. So let me choose one.
But I don't think you don't have to choose a picture. Do you? That's optional. Is that right? Yeah. But there are certain things that you do need to do.
You type your email address and also the name and the password and then you have to type the same password. And after that, you have to give your names and your surname, your country, and then your phone number. To save my time, I will just say like this. And after that, you will get a confirmation email. And then at the time, you can just, go to the one you have done the registration. So you find the incoming, you find the confirmation email and you click on it. And after that, log in here. So I will not log the connection because it can take a lot of time. So you have logged in onto the website. After that, you can go to training. I think first of all you have to register and then log in and then go to training and you will see the class and then you just click on it and you can study that. So you can study. I think that's enough. Is it okay?
That's fine. Yeah, thank you very much. Hopefully that's very clear. And again, when you click on that, you can see if once you've logged in. Did you log in before, Jan? Can you show people what they will see once they've enrolled?
Not in this device.
Okay, no problem. All right. Another time, but hopefully people can see I said the key is that if you haven't already, you need to have a register for a Teaching English account, and once you've got the Teaching English account, then you can log in on your own account, and you can come back in future months as well for future courses. All right, and you can, Jan's showing you there some of the details about the course over the next 4 weeks. Brilliant, thanks. Thanks very much, Jan, for sharing that and taking us through very quickly. I'm just going to share my screen very quickly for 1 minute, and then we're going to finish. I'm going to give the panelists the last word. So thanks, Jan, for showing us how to log on and how to register for the course. I hope you do, and I hope you find it useful. Today, we've just been able to, just in 45 minutes, been able to explore some of the issues. But as I say, there's so much more on the course that I think you'll find useful to understand about how we can use English or how we can use a multilingual approach to teaching English in our classrooms. Just to say that next month in March, very soon actually, in just about 3 weeks, I think it is, maybe even less than 3 weeks, the next course is starting, which is looking at the issue of gender in language education. So again, in about 3 weeks' time, we'll be having another webinar with teachers from across our region, from across ASEAN, to explore this issue of gender in language education. Some of you were asking about the certificate after today. So you can see on the screen, and hopefully one of my colleagues is putting in the chat, the link to the feedback form. So please give us some of your feedback on today. You can use your phone to take a picture of the QR code, and you can give us some instant feedback. When you give us some feedback on the webinar today, then you will receive an e-certificate to say that you've attended and joined our webinar today. Okay, so that's enough from me and the PowerPoints. You don't need to see any more PowerPoints. We've got 5 minutes left, so we're gonna go around. I think this is a really interesting way to finish. I'd like to hear from each of our panelists, hopefully just one because of time, one top tip from each of our panelists for the audience. We've got about 200 people in the audience so far today. One top tip from your experience to help our audience think about using multilingualism in the classroom. I'm going to go to, first I'll go to Mai in Manchester.
Yeah, my top tip, I like to go back to the paradox of teachers wanting to use a multilingual approach, but still I'm not very sure if that may take away the time for English in your classroom. So my top tip in that regard would be to establish a multilingual code of conduct in your classroom, and to set aside blocks of time when you allow or you want to encourage your students to use their own or any languages that they want to use. The first, second, third language doesn't have to be English. For example, during group discussion or pair discussion, if they're working on like a classroom task, and also other blocks of time when perhaps you would want your students to practice using English either in spoken or written format. So perhaps, and that I think that multilingual code of conduct would be could be a co-constructed guideline or agreement between you and your students as well.
Yeah, it's a really nice idea. So sometimes when we start a new class, we have like classroom rules. What should the teacher do? What should the student do? And maybe the teacher has some rules for the students, and the students make some rules for the teacher, for example. Like I say, that idea of co-creation, and just extending that idea to think about a multilingual code of conduct and multilingual classroom rules. That's really nice idea. Thanks, Mai. And so I'll say thank you. I'll say Sinkaman. Is that new, Mai? And hang apply, but please stay on. It's a little bit of code switching there. Jan.
Yes.
What about you?
Okay.
What's your top tip?
A very easy step to start a multilingual class. So you just ask your student to share the meaning of their name in their names in their own language to the other students, and also exchange the meanings of their names in other languages. At the time, it is really fun, and they will be interested in one another culture, and the teacher can show respect to the other languages and their cultural backgrounds, and the student will be quite happy. This doesn't. Yes.
I love that. I love that idea. Again, I love anything where, as you say, it's about the students sharing their own personal experience, their personal names, language, and, as you say, culture as well, which is really important. And I love the fact, certainly here in Vietnam, I can ask any student what their name means, and everyone in Vietnam knows not only what it means, but the story behind why their mother and father gave them that name. It's fascinating. You can explore that. It's a great way to start using multiple languages to start that conversation. Brilliant. Thanks, Jan. Jesu, is that right? Did I get that right, Jan? Thank you. I hope so. Let's move to Sabrina. Your top tip.
All right. So based on my experience, it will be better if you teach a multilingual classroom using a lot of learning aids, for example, like flashcard, or you can also use like popular apps today, like Kahoot or Mentimeter, something like that. Because they can make the learning interesting. And I also encourage the teacher to be more sympathetic and understanding, because it's not easy for a person to be able to speak or to learn different language and have the same level of proficiency in those languages. It takes time, it takes process, and you have to understand. Sometimes your students have accent, sometimes their first language interfere, the second or the foreign language, and that's okay as long as they don't affect the meaning. So I really encourage all of you, multilingual teachers, to be more, understanding to your students.
Yeah, thanks, Sabrina. And it's really interesting as you were explaining that. I was just looking in the chat, and I can see a few questions from some of the teachers on today's call webinar asking about using teaching aids, using dictionaries. You talked about using flashcards, using the students, the learners themselves, going back to Jan's idea of the names. The learners themselves are a fantastic resource. So use that language, use that culture that's in the classroom in a no matter how many languages. That's a great way to kind of bring the classroom alive. Thanks, Sabrina. Terima kasih. Thanks for joining us today. And last but not least, Miss Poi in Chiang Rai. What's your top tip?
To make the English is fun, we have to use the active learning approach. Make them do more than textbook. Bring them outside more than sitting in a class. So have activities outside, and the most important thing is the material. It can make them interested in learning English. Can you please, Mr. A, can you show me show some picture of some material that I use? And these are the many materials that I have to use with the children. It's can make them like interested in learning vocabulary, phonics, or whatever. And I can tell you, if someone or everybody wants the file or the things that printable things, I can send you. Just ask me and just comment in the Facebook or in the comment. I will send you all of them for the printable thing if you really need this material. So the material can help the teacher to teach something simple and easy thing for them to learn English and to have the passion of learning and playing together with English class. So that's why I think this material is important. Thank you, Mr. A.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Poi.
So
thanks for
just
sorry.
Yeah. And
Please.
the last thing that I want to share you, because because my students are that don't like to speak English and don't like to learn English. So because they're afraid, because they are the Hill tribe people, they thought that they can't do it. They cannot do anything. So I just want to tell them that always tell them that it doesn't matter if the cat is black or white, as long as it catches my. That means you don't worry where you're from, who you are. But if you can speak out loud, you can do your duty and complete your job. You are a very great person in the world as well. That's why I tell my student all the time about this.
Thanks, Poi. Kop Kun Kap. Thank you very much. I think on that, with that fantastic metaphor to finish, I just want to say a huge thank you to Sabrina, to Poi, to Mai, and to Jan for giving your time today. Thanks to everybody online for all your questions and for almost 200 of you staying with us till the very end. Sorry we didn't have time to address all your questions, but I hope you learned a lot from our panelists. And as Jan showed you before, if you're curious about this topic and would like to learn more about it, please try to enroll on the course that starts today and enjoy the course over the next 4 weeks. I hope you'll get to learn and explore even more ideas, just some of the ideas that our panelists have shared with you all today. So thank you very much again to everybody, and we'll see you all in a few weeks, hopefully at the next webinar. Thanks very much.
Thank you,
Have a great day.
everyone.
Have a great evening. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye.